So this video summarizes how to add and subtract polynomials. Hopefully in the investigation that you did with your partner, you were able to come to some conclusions on your own of how adding and subtracting polynomials works. This just summarizes it and makes sure that you understand everything completely. When you're adding polynomials, it's essentially exactly the same as collecting like terms. There's imaginary ones in front of each of these brackets, so you can put a little 1 in front of each of these if you want. But 1 times anything, so 1 times 2 and 1 times 1, or 1 times 3 and 1 times -4, that's not going to change anything. Positive 1 times 2 will result in 2, or positive 1 times 5 will result in 5. It's not going to change if you're multiplying by positive 1. So really, the easiest thing to do is to essentially ignore the brackets. So we don't really need to even do this. We can just sort of say, yeah, there's brackets, but those brackets are just separating term 1 from term 2. So that's saying here's term 1 and here's term 2, and we're going to add them together. So really, all we need to do is rewrite it as if the brackets aren't there. Then you can collect your like terms. So you can identify the x's are the same and the numbers are the same. Don't forget to include the signs with that. And you can put the terms with x's first and the constants second. And then you can simplify and get 5x minus 3. Be careful here. Remember, that positive sign is just saying that the 1 is positive. So don't put plus -3. Figure out what the answer is, and then put your sign. If the answer is positive, put a plus sign. If the answer is negative, put a minus sign. Some of you might think, could I skip a step? And yes, if you wanted to, you could skip that step and go straight to collecting like terms. Just be careful. The more steps you skip, the more mistakes you might make, and then it's harder to see where you made your errors. So if we look at the second one, same thing. We're going to ignore the brackets. So just rewrite the expression without the brackets. Now here, don't write plus negative, just write the negative, because the positive times the negative will be a negative. So just write negative a squared. If you want to put a 1 in front of that, do so. If that makes it easier for you, put the 1 there. It doesn't make a difference. Then, again, you're going to identify your like terms. You're going to put your a squareds together. You're going to put your a's together. And you're going to put your numbers together. And so we're going to start with our a squareds. Typically, when we do this, we're going to go from the highest power to the lowest power and put our coefficients at the end. So really, adding polynomials is no different than what you've just been doing with collecting like terms. It's really the same thing. Again, just watch for some common errors in terms of things with your signs. And just make sure you're aware of the mistakes that you might be making and just be really careful with those. So that's adding polynomials. Now, in your investigation, you probably noticed that subtracting might be a little bit different. And the reason for that is if we just remove the brackets. So for example, if I wrote this, 4x minus 4 minus x minus 3, if I just got rid of the brackets, the problem is I'm not just subtracting the x, I'm also subtracting the -3. When I subtract -3, it does not result in -3. Think about it. Subtracting -3 is actually like adding 3. So you have to be really careful with this one. So what you want to think about for this one, it is a lot easier if you think about it as if there is these imaginary ones in front. For this one, the bracket will not change because 1 times anything does not change. But for this one, be really careful. It's not a 1 in front. It is -1 in front. And -1 times something will change it. So -1 times x will be -x. And -1 times -3 will be +3. So be really, really careful with that. The common mistake is right there. People don't put the positive. That's a very common mistake. be careful. People will change the first sign but won't change the second sign. Then, same thing as before, you're going to collect your like terms, put your x's together, put your constants together, and simplify. So next one, again, same thing. It's going to be possibly for you easier to put the ones in front. If you don't like that, you don't have to do it. I just find sometimes it's a visual reminder of the fact that sometimes things will change when you're subtracting. So the first bracket won't change because you're just multiplying by positive 1. But the second bracket will change because you're multiplying by negative 1. So every sign is going to change. You're going to have the opposite sign of everything that was in that bracket. Again, common mistake is right there and right there. People forget to change those signs. Then you're going to collect your like terms. So put your a squareds first, your a's second, and your constants third, and then simplify. So once you get rid of the brackets, it's exactly the same as collecting like terms. It's really not that much of a different concept. And in fact, when you put these little ones in front, really what we're doing is we're using the distributive property. So adding and subtracting polynomials is not actually a new concept. It's just an extension of a concept that you already know.